Okay, professional responsibility in construction or stakeholders. Who basically involved? Okay, who basically involved? We already know from our previous slide, client must be there, consultant must be there, and then contractor. These are the three main parties or stakeholders normally involved in construction. Okay, so basically the owner or client or developer, it could be public and then private sectors. Normally, public sector are being handled the project by JKR. In Malaysia, we do JKR, JPS, or public agencies. Okay, but being a big one, JKR, JPS is always handling a big project for the public. Okay, whereas private can be anybody, even you yourself, if you want to renovate a house or whatever, you can be considered as public, private client. Okay, not to mention a big one. And then consultant must be there also, because traditionally the owner will appoint consultant. Consultant could be architect, planner, engineer, all kind of engineer, not only civil. Quantity surveyor, land surveyor, interior designer, landscape architect, other specialists, etc., etc. Not limited. You see, at the top there, I mentioned project management consultant. This is PMC, and when client engage PMC, they are being appointed first at the very beginning of the project, maybe during initiation or whatever. Okay, and the rest will come after that. Okay, then contractor. We normally appoint main contractor. We call it main contractor, or in certain literature they call it general contractor. So it's the same thing. Contractor will not do the project by themselves. They will subcontract to certain small, not to say small contractor in terms of registration, but the word sub meaning to say you are getting the project from the main contractor. Okay, but normally sometimes in our language we call it small contractor or contractor kecil, which is not which is not accurate, because the contractor can be as big as the main contractor, but they are doing contract based on what being appointed by the main contractor. And you notice the word nominated. Okay, normally main contractor will appoint subcontractor to work with them, but then there is a terminology that you should have learned during your contract class, the word nominated subcontractor. And again, there is another one, nominated supplier. Who nominate this what we call subcontractor and supplier? The client will nominate. Okay, the client will nominate. We need to say the client have the right to appoint this subcontractor and supplier to work with the contractor. Okay, to work with the contractor, and then the client will pay this nominated contractor and supplier. Nowadays, the payment has been separated. Long time ago, the payment basically through the contractor account. But then the contractor have the right to take so-called profit, what we call management profit, because the work is being done under the main contractors. Okay, then the third, another party will be supplier. Okay, supplier, we do have nominated supplier, as I already mentioned, and then manufacturer, importer, and distributor. How do product are being supplied? Sometimes the manufacturer itself produce the product and then supply those things through direct distribution to the right people. But sometimes the manufacturer don't even bother to market the product or sell at the shop or whatever. They just produce. Okay, they just produce, and then this supplier could be a third party. They are the one that get the product and do the marketing and markup on the product and whatnot. Okay, so sometimes the product could be manufactured in China, whatever. So the supplier will get those things and then put the level and sometimes even their own brand. Okay, that's what is happening in the industry actually. So the manufacturer are different people, but then the product name could belong to another company or organization. They basically claim their product, okay? But then they get the product from so-called manufacturer. Importer, whereas we do not have product here, we can import. And distributor is the one that distribute the product, get from the either the manufacturer or importer, and then they become the distributor. Sometimes you need a license to distribute certain things. People can get very rich because they are the sole distributor, because they get license from the government, then suddenly they become rich because other people simply do not get that kind of permit. Okay, so anyway, that is different form of how the product gets supplied to the contractor or subcontractor who built the project. And then contractor or subcontractor need manpower. Manpower basically do not come by itself. They're basically being attached to so-called contractor. But now people nowadays, there are also companies who do supply of workers. Previously, the workers are being attached to the subcontractor, but nowadays there are people doing business just supplying manpower. Okay, manpower, and then contractor will get that manpower and then use that manpower in order to do things. Okay, but when we talk about manpower, it comprises of professional people, maybe around 10%, whereas another 90% would be the mostly workers. Workers are being classified as skilled workers, semi-skilled, and unskilled workers. And based on the skill where they acquire through time, they will be paid accordingly. Okay. And then we do have approving authorities, federal, state, and local. Because we in Malaysia, we do have federal government. So federal government agency normally involve whatever things related to land use, airspace, water, which basically have to be shared among everybody. Normally they control those things, land matters. And then state. State also somehow control the land matters. And then on a bigger what we call things, whereas the local authorities where we do have Majlis Iskandar Putri, Johor Bahru District Council, whatever. So they basically focus on UBBL, Uniform Building by Law. If you want to construct something on the land of that belong to the district council, whatever, you must abide by the local council law. We do have law in Malaysia, we call it UBBL. Okay, but every council basically do have their own maybe differences between different state in Malaysia. So if you are designing as a designer, design certain building that belong to certain district, you must well versed with whatever rule and regulation that district council do have. And similarly, contractor, when you want to construct building, you must also abide by the local council. Different district might have different rule and regulation, so you must basically comply with those things. Okay, stakeholders, as I mentioned, major stakeholders could be client, main con, and then all consultant. And then secondary could be local authority, federal regulatory, subcontractor, supplier, financier. I already mentioned who basically need money. Okay, from the figure there, you know already who basically need money. Client need money, supplier need money, and then contractor and subcontractor need money. Where does the money come from? It could be coming from the banks, leasing loan company, Insurance company also do give loans, okay, and you can get loan from Shark, from the Along also. You can get money from your own pocket money or your pak mentua, mak mentua, besan, whatever, your wife. If you're a politician, you have all the Makauska money, so you can use your own money instead of getting loan. Okay, now I already mentioned this slide in our first class from the timeline, and you notice that there are a lot of approving body, people who get involved in all kind of so-called project phases. In such a way, all these kind of association or whatever body, they have their own regulation. For instance, even we study civil engineering or whatever engineering, we are being subjected to BAM, Board of Engineer Malaysia. They are the one that want you to study this and that, because they are the one at the end of the year will come and audit us, even you. So you realize that why do we have so many subjects that you need to take so many, because there are so many bodies that we need to comply, because it is because we are in a government agency. So again, we need to do this and that. Okay, that's how things get into the situation. Client. So what are the client responsibility? Main client responsibility is to do all the payment to all the parties, to the consultant, contractor, and etc. Client have to acquire the land. They need to pay the landowner. By right, it is not the contractor duty to fight with the landowner during construction. Contractor by right, they should have a clear what we call access to the site, because the responsibility belong to the client. You should do all the payment. Sometimes when contractor want to start the job, then there are protests from the previous landowner, whatever, because it is not being paid or being settled, whatever. That is not the job of the contractor. Okay, client should do that. And release progress payment, meaning to say, once the contractor do the work, you can do that monthly, then the client will assess or will, with the help of the consultant, to verify, and then the client will do the payment. Okay, contractor. Contractor basically need to supply the resources, as we mentioned, material, machinery, and labor. And contractor also need to have some kind of fund in order to manage a project. He or she cannot rely on the payment by the client, because the payment will come very late. Will not be in the first month, second month, third month, sometimes even fourth month, then only you will get your first payment. Okay, most of the time, project is basically being delayed due to the contractor who do not have sufficient money or fund. Consultant, what is their responsibility is to design, to come up with a drawing, to develop a document for tendering purposes, and then during construction to monitor and then verify the contractor's work for the sake of the client to basically do the payment. Civil engineer. If you work as civil engineer in a consultant firm, but your position is at the construction site, you basically you are being considered a site engineer, because you are doing site work. Okay, if you are working with the consultant firm, previously that the first one is the contractor. Consultant firm, you are being called designer at the headquarters, but then you can be called resident engineer. But resident engineer normally is the big boss at that particular site, but it normally requires experience. It is not a young graduate will not be called resident engineer anyway. Okay, normally one position only. You can become assistant resident engineer later on after a few years of experience. Okay, civil engineer. If you are working with the contractor, what could be your job function? because you are managing construction site. So again, go back to the requirement of the project, quality control, etc., etc., and then progress control, coordination, and that is all your responsibility to make sure the project progress according to what is being planned. Responsibility of SO, Superintendent Officer. Superintendent Officer, or we call it in Malay pegawai penguasa, normally a person appointed from JKR or JPS or government agency that handle the project on behalf of the government. So one senior engineer will be appointed as SO. It could be engineer or architect. QS even can be appointed. So if the government project do appoint SO, so meaning to say this guy is the big boss for that construction project. Okay, for that project, the big boss is the superintendent officer. This SO do have responsibility almost similar to resident engineer, but resident engineer normally will the position is in the private sector, but even in government project we do have resident engineer representative from consultant office. So you see, all kind of decision making, big decision making, approval, basically is the authority of SOC. Approval of payment, issue of payment, stop work order, lead coordination board, everything, okay, belong to this guy. Monitor and support work, etc. And the worst thing, the last one, giving instruction to pertaining information, removal of rejected material, work, and person. Meaning to say, SO can fire people. You are fired, including project manager. Even though project manager being appointed by contractor, but everything at that particular site basically belong to the client. Everything, including people, work, and material. Actually, because it is the client who pay money. So client basically have the right to do so. Okay, have the right to do so. Then architect is which is basically doing design. Okay, we engineer doing the architect normally involve the surfacing. People look at the face of the building, but we engineer looking at inside the building. Okay, that is the difference between engineer and then what we call architect. Okay, quantity surveyor doing taking off and then estimating on what we call during design stage, and during construction also they are available, but depend on the project, because whatever progress payment, whatever issue with regard to contract, they could know better compared to civil engineer. Okay, so but not every country do have quantity surveyor. We Malaysia, we follow British way of doing things. We do have such profession. In US, for instance, there is no such profession as a quantity surveyor. They do have cost engineer. Who is the cost engineer? Normally engineer. Okay, you zoom in the career as cost engineer. Mechanical engineer, electrical engineer also needed, because in whatever building we do have all kind of M&E facilities, so we need to have those people. But again, not all the project do have mechanical electrical engineer. For small project, the engineer is the one that need to understand the building services work. That's why I'm not really sure in your syllabus. Long time ago, we do have building services syllabus being taught by mechanical and electrical lecturer there. You might have learned a little bit about this thing as well. Responsibility of resident engineer. Okay, as I mentioned, resident engineer is the similar position as a project manager, but project manager normally belong to contractor. Resident engineer belong to consultant. Meaning to say, is the highest position at the construction site. Okay, so he is big boss also. If SO is not there, So this guy is the leader, the lead. Everything approval basically have to come from him. Okay, he has the similar authority as in the SO. Okay, and then site manager. Sometimes we call it site manager, construction manager, and even sometimes at the construction site, we do have project manager and construction manager, both. So what are the differences between these two professions? Normally, project manager have to do a lot of liaison with all the parties. He had to go here and there and meeting with everybody. So most of the time he might not be at the site. Whereas all the problem basically is at the site. So who is going to tackle? That's why we do have site manager that always remain at the site, tackling all the issue with regard to the site problems. Okay, so it depends on how big is your project anyway. Responsibility of supervisors. Supervisor is, I would say, first is project manager, and then engineer, and then supervisor. The most important, one of the most important person at any construction project is the supervisor. Okay, he is the one that very close to the foreman, subsequently the workers. All the work execution basically is under his basically instruction. Okay, so the project manager will do the planning, and then engineer will do also planning, and then the thing will be passed to the supervisor. Supervisor will pass to the foreman, and then foreman basically will tell all the group, the workers leader, and subsequently to the leader. Without the supervisor, then work might not be done accordingly, because engineer might not know much compared to the supervisor. You know this thing when you do your practical training, isn't it? You do your practical training, now you are engineer, big shot, going to the construction site, but without no knowledge. The one that know more is supervisor. Even the supervisor might hold a diploma or some kind of certificate, but in terms of work, he basically know better than you as a fresh graduate. Surveyor is the one that involved at the beginning of the project, because he need to come up with all the contour and plan so that engineer will design according to the contour, whatever. But during construction, we need to construct everything, need all kind of alignment. So the best way is to have a proper surveyor. Sometimes we do have a licensed surveyor, which is what we call professional surveyor. Even though as an engineer, you might have certain knowledge. And again, if you work at a small construction site, meaning to say you are the engineer, you are the QS, you are the office boy, you are the surveyor, and you become everybody. You see? So if you want to learn more, you should work at a small project. Then you will have to do more. Okay, you will have to learn more. Manpower, as I mentioned, it could be classified into workers, semi-skilled, skilled, etc. And then we do have technician, and then we do have supervisor, we do have engineer. Normally, we classify the professional according to degree, first degree, bachelor degree, and then what we call diploma, and then certification. But construction can accommodate, always can accommodate people who do not have even degree. Sometimes they don't have degree, but they can be called project manager. Well, that is the nature of construction. If you know more, then why not? But in terms of so-called approval, if you want to be engineer in Malaysia, you need to get some kind of degree or even approval by IEM by going through what we call certain exam. But normally the exam is very difficult to pass. So going to university is much more easier, especially during COVID. Everybody got A plus by doing nothing, because you can always copy paste everything. Even during exam also, you can look, see, everybody got a very good grade during COVID. You should not be happy about that, because it might not reflect the whole yourself. Okay, now supplier of material and machinery, I already mentioned. Supplier is needed, and sometimes supplier give some kind of incentive to the contractor, credit rating, credit facility, so that contractor will get all the supply without paying first. Later on only you pay, because supplier also want to get job, secure job. If you can get a job with certain contractor, then you can survive for a few years. Financier, I already mentioned, bank, loan, authority, see? There are so many authorities, maybe up to 30 authorities. I just simply put in my slide a few name of the authority in Malaysia. Okay, if you want to develop a project, you must be getting approval from many authorities. That could be up to 30 plus something. See, because of that, then we do have all kind of problem, bureaucratic problem, and somehow it invite unethical practice, such as corrupt practice. Because if you want to get things done fast, then you go through different channel. That is not good thing that is happening. Okay, so that is the slide that I want to cover in project responsibility.